I'm Oliver, and what you're about to hear is a glimpse beyond the veil of this world. For years, I've listened to those who died and came back transformed. I share their voices so far, exactly as they told them. These are not fantasies. They are lived truths, encounters with something greater, divine, terrifying, or both. Prepare your soul, because once you've seen what lies beyond death, life is never the same.
If you're ready to walk this journey with me, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. You won't want to miss what comes next.
There's something powerful that happens when we stop pretending and start being honest about our silent struggles. This is not a sermon. It's not a speech. This is my story, a testimony I never planned to share. But what happened to me changed the way I understand prayer, faith, and how deeply we are seen, especially when we think no one is listening. So if you've ever felt like your quiet cries didn't count, if you've ever wondered if your thoughts were too small for heaven to notice, then maybe this story is for you. I've always been the kind of person who fades into the background. I'm not the loudest voice in the room. I don't command attention when I walk in. If you passed me on the street, you probably wouldn't remember my face. But inside, there was always a war, a kind of noise that never really stopped. Since I was a teenager, I've battled anxiety, the kind that doesn't sleep, the kind that turns small things into massive weights. I'd lie awake most nights with my mind running marathons while my body begged for rest. People around me never knew. I smiled, I functioned, I worked, but I was never at peace. I used to think I was the only one like that everyone else had it figured out, how to pray, how to speak to God, how to live with some sort of spiritual clarity. I tried to copy what I saw. I'd get down on my knees, whisper words I didn't feel, say the right things hoping maybe I'd be heard. But most days, my prayers never left my head. They were just thoughts, simple, tired, sometimes desperate thoughts like, God, help me, or please don't let me fall apart today. I felt guilty about that, like I wasn't doing it right, like I was failing some spiritual exam no one else seemed to be struggling with. No one ever told me that God listens to thoughts. They told me to speak out loud, to declare things, to be bold in prayer. And I wanted to. I really did. But something about the way I was wired just made that feel impossible most of the time. It was like my voice got stuck in my chest, and the more I tried to force it, the more distant I felt from God. So I gave up trying to sound right and just started thinking about Him, quietly, randomly, in the middle of my anxiety, in the middle of my errands, in the quiet chaos of everyday life. I didn't know if it meant anything. I didn't know if He cared. What I did know was that the weight inside me never fully lifted, and every day felt like a quiet war, a fight no one else could see. I wondered how many people were just like me, functioning on the outside, breaking on the inside. And I kept telling myself, you're fine, keep going. This is just life. Until one day, I couldn't keep going. Until one quiet moment, waiting at a bus stop like any other. I thought something so simple that it cracked the sky open. God, I'm tired. No voice, no tears, just a thought. And that's when everything changed. That moment started something I still struggle to explain. It felt like time slowed down, like the noise inside me finally went quiet. Not because I found the perfect prayer, not because I fixed myself, but because somehow, someone heard me, really heard me. And that thought, the one I believed was too small to matter, became the loudest cry in heaven. I didn't imagine it. I didn't dream it. I experienced something real, something eternal. And it started with the kind of silent, tired thought that I used to dismiss. This story isn't about perfection. It's not even about having the right theology. It's about a God who listens when no one else does. A God who isn't waiting for polished words but for honest hearts. And if you've ever wondered whether your quiet thoughts matter, if you've ever felt invisible, even to God, I want to tell you what I wish someone had told me. You're not invisible. Your thoughts aren't meaningless, and the silence isn't empty. It's heard, every single time. If you stay with me through this story, you'll see what I mean. You'll see how I found proof, undeniable, unforgettable proof, that God doesn't need your words to hear your heart, that even when all you can do is think about Him, even when your mouth can't form the prayer, heaven still leans in. So let me take you back to that day, to that moment, because it changed everything for me. And maybe, just maybe, it can change something in you too. I don't remember hitting the ground. One second I was sitting at the bus stop, mentally listing off everything that was falling apart in my life, and the next, I was gone. Or at least, that's how it felt. There were no dramatic sounds, no flashes of light, just stillness, like the world let go of me for a moment. It was quiet, strangely quiet. And then, in that silence, something opened. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't the foggy, surreal sensation of passing out. This was different, sharper, like my soul had stepped into a place my body couldn't follow. I felt myself leave, and it wasn't scary. It was peaceful, unnaturally peaceful. I wish I could explain it better. The place I found myself in, it had no walls, no ceiling, no ground that I could touch, but it felt more solid than anything I'd ever known. It was like standing inside light, not harsh or blinding, but soft and infinite. I couldn't see the sun, but there was brightness. I couldn't hear music, but something in the air sang peace to me. And for the first time in my life, the noise in my mind was completely gone. There was no anxiety, no overthinking, no guilt, just presence, just silence that felt alive. And that's when I heard it, my name. It didn't come from outside. It wasn't a booming voice or a whisper in my ear. It was deeper. It was as if the name had always been written in the deepest part of me and someone had just called it forward. And I knew, without doubt, without fear, I knew it was Jesus. Not an idea, not a symbol. Him. The real him. The kind you don't question when you see, because your soul recognizes what your brain never could. He wasn't angry. He wasn't distant. He was everything I had longed for but didn't know how to ask. And he said my name like it mattered. I thought he would scold me. I thought he'd ask why I never prayed out loud, why I let my faith get so quiet. I was ready for correction. I was ready to be reminded of everything I didn't do. But none of that came. Instead, he looked at me, really looked at me. And what I saw in his eyes wasn't disappointment. It was recognition, like he'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for me. And when he spoke again, I couldn't hold back the tears. He said, "You thought I didn't hear you, but I heard everything, every thought, every cry, even the ones you never said out loud." I tried to speak. I wanted to apologize, to explain why I had been so silent, why I had thought so much but said so little. But before I could, he stepped closer, not in judgment, not in demand, in compassion. He said, "I listened to every thought, even the ones you didn't think mattered." And then, like unveiling a secret only he could hold, he began to show me moments from my life. Not the big ones, not the ones people would expect. These were quiet, invisible moments. Moments I had forgotten. Moments I had thought meant nothing. He showed me a day in the cafeteria at work, sitting alone with a cold cup of coffee, my head hurting, everything going wrong. I had thought, "God, give me strength." I hadn't said it. I hadn't even fully formed the words. But he remembered. He said, "Heaven heard that as a cry." And I broke, because I didn't even remember saying it, thinking it even. But he did. He had remembered every detail, every emotion attached to the moment, like a father who keeps every drawing, every note, no matter how messy or simple. That thought mattered to him. It had always mattered. Scene after scene played before me. Nights when I couldn't sleep, staring at the ceiling, repeating silently, "God, please stay with me." Times I stood in the shower and closed my eyes because life was too heavy. Times I looked out the window trying not to cry and just thought his name. And each time, Jesus looked at me with this tenderness that words can't reach. He said, "I stayed with you. I heard you. Even when you didn't think I did." I wasn't invisible to him. My silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. It was seen. It was heard. He began to show me others, people I had never met. A man sitting in a broken bathroom leaning on the wall thinking, "Does God still love me?" A child in a shelter, whispering in his thoughts before sleep, "God, are you there?" A woman folding laundry, too exhausted to pray out loud, just thinking, "Help me." And Jesus said, "They thought they were just thinking, but that was prayer." And I stood there stunned, realizing that we had all believed a lie. that if it wasn't loud, it wasn't real, that if it didn't come with words, it didn't count. But to heaven it counted. He showed me jars, clear, shining jars, each one filled with something invisible to the human eye. These, he said, are silent prayers, thoughts of hope, whispers of surrender, unshed tears, all collected, all remembered. Angels, he told me, gathered them. Not a single thought turned to him went unnoticed. Not one. I felt the weight of it, the holiness of it. How many times had I believed I was weak because I couldn't pray like others? And yet in this place, my weakness had been my offering, and he had called it worship. Jesus turned to me and said something I'll never forget. You thought silence was failure, but it brought you closer to me than you knew. My heart shattered, in the best way. Every lie I had believed about prayer, about faith, about what God expects, undone in an instant. I had been showing up all along. I had been seen all along. And I wasn't alone in this. Millions of us walking through life thinking our whispers weren't enough. But they were. And I was going to have to carry this truth back with me. Then he took me to a place unlike anything I'd seen before. It was like walking through someone's mind. There were sounds and memories and voices, but they weren't loud. They pulsed with feeling. It was chaos and peace all at once. And Jesus said, "This is where most battles are fought, not at the altar, in the mind." And suddenly I saw my own mind, the doubt, the fear, the voices that said, "You're not good enough. You don't pray right. God doesn't hear you." And he looked at me with a fire in his eyes and said, "Those voices weren't mine." That moment cut me deep, because I had lived so long with those voices that I didn't realize they were lies. I had accepted them as truth. But Jesus wasn't just comforting me. He was fighting for me. He said, "Every time you thought of me in your chaos, you were pushing back. Every silent thought was a victory." And in that moment, I felt a shift, like something broke off of me. Shame, doubt, guilt. It couldn't stay in the presence of truth. And the truth was this: prayer isn't performance, it's presence. Then he showed me others again. A young man trying to pray while his mind raced from panic. A mother washing dishes thinking, "God, I can't do this today." A man gripping a steering wheel too overwhelmed to speak. "They're not weak," Jesus said. "They're warriors. Every thought toward me builds a shield they can't see. But I see it, and I honor it." And I began to understand that this life isn't about impressing God. It's about reaching for him in whatever way we can, even with nothing but a thought. And then he said, "You thought you were barely holding on, but every silent thought of me was you holding on tighter than you knew." That hit me hard, because I had judged myself for not doing enough. I had seen myself as spiritually lazy. But Jesus saw every internal battle, every effort to focus my thoughts on him, as sacred. And now, standing there, hearing him say those words, I felt like I had been handed back the pieces of myself I'd long abandoned. I wasn't weak. I was seen. I was heard. I was loved, even in silence. I don't know how long we stood there, Jesus and I. Time didn't move the same way in that place. It breathed. It pulsed with purpose, like even silence had a rhythm. I was overwhelmed, but not in fear. Overwhelmed in awe. Jesus had just peeled back the invisible and shown me that heaven wasn't watching from a distance. It was involved. Every sigh, every internal whisper, every desperate please in the middle of the night was sacred. I had spent years thinking my faith was small, weak, even broken, but he saw it differently. To him, it was faithful. It was intimate. It was real. There was a moment where Jesus went quiet again, not distant, just still. And in that stillness, I felt something stir inside me, a deeper question I didn't know I was carrying. Why me? Why show me all of this? Why reveal the invisible, the holy significance of something I barely believed in myself? I didn't speak it. I didn't have to. He turned to me like he had heard what I hadn't said, and his eyes said everything. Not because I was worthy, not because I had earned it, but because he wanted me to know, you've never been overlooked. The next thing he said pierced me to my core. I never expected perfect prayers. I never asked for eloquence. I only ever wanted you. That stopped me. Completely. I had built a lifetime of spiritual effort trying to be better, do better, say it better. But here he was, dismantling it with one sentence. He never expected performance, just presence. Me, the real me, even the broken parts, especially the broken parts. And I realized, this whole time, I had been waiting to become someone worthy of being heard, but he had been listening from the beginning. Then something changed. The space around us opened like a veil had been pulled back, and I saw something glowing in the distance. It looked like a portal, but it wasn't scary. It felt calm, peaceful, like home. Jesus gestured toward it and said, "You can rest here, or you can return." My breath caught. I didn't want to go back. Not after feeling this kind of peace. Not after finally being seen, truly seen. But then he added something else, something that anchored everything that came next. If you return, you accept a mission. He didn't push me. He didn't command me. But the weight of his words filled the space like a calling too clear to ignore. "Tell them what I told you," he said. "Tell them I hear them, even when they only think, even when no words come out. When their hearts turn toward me in silence, heaven leans in." That was it. The reason. The purpose behind the pain, behind the silence, behind the collapse at the bus stop. I had always thought my voice wasn't loud enough for God. But now, he was asking me to use it to tell others they are heard. He looked at me with a softness I'll never forget and said, "Even without words, even with just thoughts, I've always been there." Then he spoke one last verse into the air around us. It glowed with a light I can't explain. "The Spirit himself intercedes for you with groanings too deep for words." Romans 8:26. And when he said it, it wasn't just a quote. It was a promise. I had lived it. And now I was being asked to carry it. This truth that prayer can be wordless, that love can listen without sound, that heaven doesn't need volume to respond. Then everything began to dissolve. Not in fear, not in loss, but like light returning to its source. The world around me started pulling back. I could feel my body again, far away. I heard sounds, metal clinks, fast voices. I was back, the ambulance, the real world. But something had changed. Eternity had touched me, and it didn't leave when I opened my eyes. I came back different, not louder, not more religious, just more certain. I knew now that every thought I had ever directed toward God was real, was heard, and nothing could ever take that from me again. Recovery wasn't instant. My body was exhausted, and the doctors called it a stress-induced collapse with mild cardiac trauma. But I knew better. It wasn't stress that changed me. It was grace. I rested, yes, but inside, I was more awake than I'd ever been. I couldn't keep what I had seen to myself, so I began to tell those closest to me, quietly at first, unsure how to explain something that defied logic. But the more I spoke, the more I saw their faces shift, like something in them cracked open, like they'd been carrying the same quiet guilt. One friend, a mother of 3, told me through tears that she often felt she was failing spiritually because she couldn't find the words to pray. Another confessed he hadn't prayed in years because he believed God had stopped listening. And every time I repeated what Jesus told me, "You were heard." Every thought, every time. And I could see the relief in their eyes, the weight lifting. I hadn't just been given an experience, I'd been given a message, one that people needed more than they ever admitted, that silence isn't absence, that internal prayer is still communion. I started to notice something else. People were starving for simplicity, for truth that didn't require performance. They didn't need a new technique. They needed permission to be real, to be weak, to be messy and silent, and still be heard. I found myself repeating that phrase over and over, not as a slogan, but as a soul-level reminder. God hears even this, the random thought, the heavy sigh, the mental cry. He hears it all. And suddenly, I wasn't ashamed of how I prayed. I was grateful that God doesn't require sound to listen. I remember sitting on my couch one afternoon, looking at the ceiling, and thinking only one thing, God, I'm here. That was it. And the tears came, not from sadness, but from knowing that it was enough. I didn't need to earn his attention. I already had it, and I wanted everyone to know. Not to become more religious, but to finally rest. To stop judging their spiritual life by volume and start trusting in presence. And that's when I realized this was how revival begins. Not with shouting, but with listening, with honesty, with the quiet turning of the heart. That's what this story is. Not a miracle to impress, a message to deliver, a truth too real to stay quiet about. If you're someone who's ever wondered if your thoughts matter, if your silence counts, I'm telling you, it does. If your mind is too loud to pray, but your heart still reaches, He hears that. If all you can do is whisper in your thoughts, "God, please," it is enough. Because prayer isn't about format, it's about direction. If your heart turns toward Him, even in a whisper, even in a thought, you are seen, you are heard, you are loved. So now when people come to me and say, "I can't pray right," or "all I can do is think about Him," I smile, because I know, and I tell them, that's prayer too. That's enough. And something shifts in them. You can see it, like their soul finally exhales, like they stop trying to perform and start trying to connect. And that's what this is all about. Not getting it perfect, just turning your heart in His direction, just letting Him meet you where you are, not with fancy words, but with the honest, holy truth that even your silent thoughts are worship. And now, if there's one thing I pray you take with you from my story, it's this: God hears you. Not just when you sing, not just when you speak, but when you think, when your soul whispers, when your heart aches silently, when your words fail but your spirit still reaches. That's not weakness, that's faith, that's prayer, and heaven hears every bit of it. So if you've ever felt like your quiet cries didn't matter, if you've ever believed your silence meant God was distant, let this testimony be your reminder. He is closer than your breath. He is listening. You don't have to shout to shake heaven. Sometimes the loudest prayers are the ones no one else hears. Your thoughts are not forgotten. Your battles are not ignored. And your relationship with God doesn't begin when you speak. It begins the moment your heart turns toward Him. Now it's your turn. Let this be more than just a story you watched. Make it a turning point. If this spoke to you, if it made something shift inside, don't walk away in silence. Subscribe to this channel and follow Jesus. Not just in your words, but in your thoughts, your heart, your silence. Let every quiet moment become communion. Let every tired whisper become worship. And if you know someone who feels unseen, unheard, or spiritually not enough, share this with them. Remind them of what I learned the hard way, that the God of heaven listens not just to prayers spoken out loud, but to every heartbeat that dares to believe He's near, even when the world goes quiet. This is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of a new way to pray, a new way to believe. So stay with me, walk with me. There's more to discover, more to remember, more to feel, even in the silence. Thank you for listening, not just with your ears, but with your heart. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, keep thinking about Him. Keep turning your heart toward Him, because every time you do, He hears you.